I used to laugh at it. The crayon drawing, taped to the refrigerator door, where a little girl had sketched her family, mom, her brother, the dog, the house, and a blank space where a father should have been. Guess I was at work that day, I'd joke to Sarah. She'd smile politely, but her eyes always told another story. That was years ago. Last month, while cleaning out the attic, I found that same drawing in a dusty box. The colors had faded, but the absence was still as sharp as ever. I sat there, 49 years old, staring at a paper that somehow knew the truth long before I did. I was never really there. I had the titles, vice president, partner, rainmaker. I had the money, I had the respect. But in that moment, holding a drawing made by the little girl who used to wait by the window for me to come home, I realized I had nothing that truly mattered. I had built a career so high it blocked my view of the life I was supposed to be living, and my family had quietly moved on without me. That drawing, it wasn't just missing my picture. It was missing my presence, my love, my time. This is the story of how I almost lost everything that mattered, and the fight to earn my place back in my own family's picture. I grew up in a 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio. My father worked double shifts at a factory. My mother cleaned offices at night. We were what people politely called middle class, but most months, it felt like we were holding on by a thread. I remember lying awake as a kid, listening to my parents argue quietly in the kitchen about overdue bills. Those nights hardened something in me, a promise that my family would never live like that. When I was 21, fresh out of college with a degree in finance and a head full of ambition, I met Sarah. She had this warmth about her, an optimism that cut through my restless drive. We married 2 years later, in a small ceremony where I wore a borrowed suit, and she carried daisies because roses were too expensive. I looked at her that day and swore to myself I would give her everything she deserved: a house, stability, comfort. The kind of life I'd always believed belonged to other people. By the time our daughter Lily was born, I was working at an investment firm downtown. It wasn't glamorous, long hours, endless spreadsheets, but it was a start. Every late night at the office felt like a brick in the foundation of a better future. Sarah would bring Lily to visit me sometimes. I remember one evening, Lily toddled into my office holding a drawing. A big house, a shiny car, a stick figure in a suit. "That's you, Daddy," she said proudly. I taped it to my wall like a badge of honor. Those early years were good. We weren't rich, but we were building something. Sarah and I bought a modest home in a nice neighborhood. We had barbecues with neighbors, Sunday mornings at the park, and movie nights on the couch. I was tired all the time, but it felt worth it. When promotions came, I framed them in my mind as proof that I was keeping my promise. The work ethic that had defined my childhood now defined my career. I was the first one in the office and the last one to leave. My boss noticed. So did Sarah. She would brag to her friends about how hard I worked, how dedicated I was to building a future for us. "He's going places," she'd say, smiling. And I believed it too. I was climbing the ladder one rung at a time, certain that each step was a step toward security, happiness, and a perfect American family life. The truth is, back then, I wore my exhaustion like a badge. The long hours were proof that I was the kind of man who provided, who sacrificed. I didn't see the warning signs because, at first, there weren't any. Sarah was proud. Lily adored me. When I walked through the door on Friday nights, she'd run down the hallway and throw herself into my arms. Those were the moments that fueled me through the next week of 12-hour days. And maybe that's where the first twist in my story began. Not in neglect, but in admiration. People looked at our family and saw a success story in the making. I was the model of the American dream, the man who'd worked his way up from nothing, who had a beautiful wife, a healthy daughter, and a career that was rising fast. There was no hint, not yet, that I was laying the groundwork for my own undoing. The firm started giving me more responsibility. I handled bigger accounts, met higher-profile clients, traveled to New York for deals. My name was whispered in the hallways as partner material. And at home, Sarah encouraged it. "Just think where we'll be in 5 years," she'd say, holding Lily on her hip. I thought about it constantly. 5 years meant a bigger house, better schools, vacations in places my parents had only ever seen on TV. And Lily, sweet Lily, she would draw pictures of our family and slip them into my briefcase. Sometimes the drawings were of a big house, sometimes of a sunny beach, and always, in those pictures, I was there, smiling, holding her hand, right in the center of her world. I taped them all over my office walls, each one a reminder of why I was pushing so hard. Looking back now, I realize that was the cruelest part. In those early years, my hard work wasn't just tolerated, it was celebrated. Sarah believed in me. Lily believed in me. And I believed that the sacrifices I was making would lead us all somewhere better. What I didn't understand then, and what I can only see clearly now, is that the admiration that fueled me was also the very thing that would blind me. Because no one warns you that the climb toward the American dream is steep, and sometimes, when you look back, you realize you've climbed alone. Success has a way of rewriting your calendar for you. In the beginning, I thought I was still in control. I'd block out Saturdays for family, reserve Friday evenings for dinner at home. But somewhere along the way, my schedule started filling itself. Meetings crept into the evenings. Conference calls slid into weekends. Business trips stretched a few days longer than planned. It wasn't just work hours. It was every minute of my day, spoken for before I even woke up. My assistant joked that my calendar looked like a losing game of Tetris, every slot crammed with something important. And I let it happen. Because in my mind, each packed day meant I was building something better for Sarah and Lily. At first, Sarah played along. When I missed dinner, she'd send me a photo of what Lily had cooked with her toy kitchen set. When I couldn't make a school art show, she'd text me pictures of Lily holding her drawings. She would always say, "Don't worry. She understands you're working hard for us." And I believed her. But little by little, I noticed a change. The updates became shorter, less frequent. A text without a photo. A casual, "it went fine," instead of a detailed story. I told myself it was just life getting busier for both of us. But now, I see it for what it was. The quiet erosion of connection. One Friday, I came home early. Early meaning just before Lily's bedtime. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the dishwasher. Sarah was reading in the living room. "How was the school assembly?" I asked, loosening my tie. She looked up from her book, hesitated. "It was good." I frowned. "Why didn't you tell me? I could have tried to be there." Her smile was thin. "I didn't think it was worth interrupting your meeting for." It was such a small exchange, but it stayed with me. For the first time, I had the uneasy sense that events were happening without me. Not because I couldn't make them, but because I was no longer invited to try. Sarah never accused me of anything. That wasn't her way. She simply adjusted. She stopped sending reminders about parent-teacher nights. She no longer asked if I could take a half day for the science fair. Life at home began to operate on the assumption that I wouldn't be there. Lily adapted too. She stopped asking if I'd come to her games or recitals. When I did show up, she seemed surprised, like I was a guest who had dropped in unexpectedly. There was no anger, just a quiet recalibration of expectations. One evening, as I was packing for yet another trip, I noticed a new drawing on the refrigerator. A sunny day, a playground, Sarah on a bench, Lily on the swings. No father in the picture. I stared at it for a long time. Sarah came into the kitchen, saw me looking. "She drew that yesterday," she said lightly, as if it were nothing. "Where am I?" I asked, half joking. Sarah's voice was careful. "I guess you were at work that day." It was almost the same joke I had made years earlier about her first drawing, but this time, there was something different in her tone, something I didn't want to look at too closely. I told myself it was temporary, just until this quarter's big deal closed, just until I landed the next client, just until the next promotion. Every milestone had a promise attached. After this, things will calm down. But they never did. I started to notice other absences, the fridge calendar filled with events I didn't know about until they had passed. Birthday parties for Lily's friends, family outings to the zoo, school performances. Sarah didn't hide them. She just didn't announce them anymore. It wasn't malicious. It was acceptance. She had stopped expecting me to be there, so she stopped making space for my absence. It's the kind of shift you don't notice when it's happening in real time. But looking back, it was the moment the drift became permanent. In my mind, I was still the dedicated father, the loving husband who happened to be busy. In reality, I was becoming a shadow in my own house, someone whose place at the table was no longer assumed, someone whose presence was optional. At the time, I didn't feel alarmed. I still believed that my family understood, that they knew all of this was for them. What I didn't realize was that understanding doesn't keep people from feeling the distance, and love, no matter how deep, can only stretch so far before it starts to fray. By the time I was 45, I had everything I thought I wanted. My name was on the door of the corner office. My salary was more than my parents had earned in a decade. Colleagues came to me for advice. Junior associates whispered about my career like it was some kind of legend. The firm had just nominated me for one of the industry's most prestigious awards, a recognition that felt like the final stamp of legitimacy. This wasn't just success. This was proof that all those long nights and missed dinners had been worth it. The awards dinner was held at a hotel ballroom in Chicago. Hundreds of people in black tie, champagne flutes in hand, the kind of polished event you'd see in glossy business magazines. My table was filled with senior partners, clients, and industry leaders. The MC spoke my name with practiced admiration. David Miller, a man whose dedication and vision have set a new standard for excellence. As I walked to the stage, applause rose like a wave. Cameras flashed. I smiled, shook hands, accepted the glass trophy. The lights were hot. The room was loud, and for a moment, I let myself feel the weight of victory. That's when my phone buzzed. At first, I ignored it. Rule number 1, never check your phone on stage. But as I stepped down, I caught the screen lighting up again. It was a text from Sarah. "Lily's running a high fever. We're taking her to the ER." I froze, the noise of the room fading into a kind of hollow echo. I typed back quickly, "How bad?" Sarah's reply came almost immediately. "She's asking for you." I glanced around the room. The managing partner was motioning for me to join a group photo. A client was holding out his hand. The applause was still dying down. I told myself it was fine. Kids get fevers. Sarah was with her. I'd fly home in the morning. But as I posed for the picture, smiling under the bright lights, I felt a sharp, unfamiliar twist in my chest. After the dinner, alone in my hotel room, I called Sarah. "How is she?" "She's sleeping now," she said. Her voice was even, but there was an undertone I couldn't place. "They think it's just a virus. The doctor said she'll be okay." Relief washed over me, but it was followed immediately by something heavier. Guilt. "Put the phone near her," I said. "I just want to—" "She's asleep, David. She needed you earlier." The line went quiet. I stared at the hotel window, the city lights reflecting off the glass trophy sitting on the desk. I had the award I'd been chasing for years. But my daughter had been sick, and I wasn't there. The next morning, I flew home. Sarah met me at the door, tired but composed. Lily was on the couch, pale but smiling weakly. She hugged me, but it wasn't the tight, overjoyed embrace I remembered from years ago. It was gentler, almost careful. I told myself it was because she wasn't feeling well. But a small, unwelcome thought lodged itself in my mind. Maybe she was just getting used to me not being there when she needed me most. That weekend, while unpacking, I set the trophy on a shelf in my home office. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, every time I looked at it, I saw Sarah's text. "She's asking for you." I told myself it was an anomaly, a one-time thing, but deep down, I think I knew better. This was the trap I had built for myself, a career so consuming that even at the height of success, I was already losing the people I was doing it for. And the worst part? I didn't stop. Not then, not yet. Sarah never said the word single mom, but I started to see it in the way our life was structured. When I was home, the house still ran on the same rhythms, but none of them involved me. Sarah had her own systems. The fridge calendar was filled with color-coded reminders. Lily's piano lessons, soccer practice, school projects. I wasn't part of any of them. When Lily was younger, Sarah used to wait for me to come home before starting dinner. Now, she and Lily ate at 6 sharp, whether I was there or not. I would walk in later to a quiet house, the smell of reheated leftovers, and 2 voices talking in another room. It wasn't hostility. It was practicality. Sarah had learned how to keep things moving without factoring me in, and the more she adjusted, the less I noticed, until one day I realized the house functioned perfectly well without me. Lily adapted even faster. Kids are good at that. She stopped leaving her school schedule on my desk for me to see. She stopped asking if I could drive her to games. When I did make it to a recital, she looked happy, but surprised, like I was a guest who had dropped in unexpectedly. One evening, I came home early and found Sarah and Lily in the kitchen, baking cookies. They were laughing about something Lily's friend had done at school. I leaned in the doorway, smiling, waiting for a natural moment to join the conversation. But the conversation didn't pause for me. They didn't ignore me exactly. They just didn't need me to be part of it. That was when it hit me. They had built a life I wasn't central to. Still, there were moments when I convinced myself nothing had really changed. Like Lily's birthday. Every year, without fail, she would leave a handmade card for me on the breakfast table, a tradition she'd started when she was 5. That year, her 11th birthday came and went. I was in Boston on business. I called that morning, sent flowers to the house, and promised I'd make it up to her when I got back. When I returned 2 days later, there was no card waiting for me. I thought maybe she'd forgotten, or Sarah had set it aside somewhere. That night, after Lily went to bed, I asked Sarah about it. "She didn't make one this year," Sarah said, not unkindly. I laughed, a little too quickly. "She's getting older, I guess." Sarah looked at me for a long moment. She said she didn't know what to write. The words stayed with me like a stone in my chest. I wanted to tell myself it was normal, that kids grow up, that traditions change. But deep down, I knew better. For 10 years, she'd found something to say. For 10 years, she'd taken the time to make sure I knew I was part of her celebration. This was the first year she hadn't. I sat in my office that night, staring at the stack of cards from previous years, kept neatly in a drawer. The drawings had changed over time, from stick figures to more detailed pictures, but the message was always the same. "Happy birthday, Dad. I love you." There was no message this year. Sarah didn't bring it up again, and neither did I. On the surface, life went on as usual, but I could feel something subtle shifting, like a rope being loosened, one knot at a time. I told myself there would be other birthdays, other chances. I believed there was still time, but in the quiet moments, I started to wonder if my family had simply learned how to live without needing me at all. There's a certain kind of warning you only recognize in hindsight. The quiet moments that should have jolted you awake, but instead pass by like background noise. The first came in the form of an email from Lily's school. Annual Fall Festival, Families Welcome. It had photos from previous years. Games, food stalls, a pumpkin patch. I opened it at my desk, meaning to forward it to Sarah and block off the date on my calendar. But then a call came in from a major client, and the email sank to the bottom of my inbox. The festival came and went. Sarah sent a single photo. Lily holding a pumpkin, smiling beside her friends. I wasn't in the picture. A few weeks later, there was a big soccer match. Lily had been talking about it for months. She played goalie and her team was undefeated. Sarah asked if I could make it. I checked my calendar and saw a client dinner scheduled for the same evening. "Maybe I can catch the second half," I said. I didn't. That night, Sarah sent me another photo. Lily, grass-stained and grinning, holding a small trophy. The caption read simply, "They won." I stared at the picture for a long time. I wanted to call her, to tell her how proud I was, but by the time the dinner ended, it was too late. I told myself I'd make it up to her the next weekend, but I never did. The biggest wake-up call came at a parent-teacher conference. Sarah had mentioned it in passing, but I'd been vague about my schedule. That afternoon, I got a text from a colleague. "Just saw Sarah at the school. She was with someone? Looked like another dad?" I felt a strange chill, though I couldn't have explained why. When I asked Sarah later, she said calmly, "Oh, that's Mark. He's in Lily's class committee. He helped me carry some supplies." It was a perfectly reasonable explanation, but something about it stuck with me. The fact that she hadn't told me he'd be there. The ease in her voice. The simple reality that she didn't expect me to be part of that world anymore. In truth, it wasn't about Mark. It was about the fact that Sarah had stopped looking to me as her partner in these moments. When she needed someone at the school, she called someone else. That night, I sat alone in my office, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Sarah wasn't being unfaithful. She was just filling in the gaps I had left. But that was the problem. There were so many gaps now that my presence wasn't missed the way it used to be. Every one of these moments was a chance to wake up, a chance to rearrange my schedule, to show up even if it meant disappointing a client. But I didn't. I told myself there would always be another festival, another game, another conference. What I didn't see was that each missed moment wasn't isolated. It was cumulative, a slow erosion that, by this point, was nearly complete. I still thought I was doing the right thing, that my family understood. But the truth was, they had stopped waiting for me a long time ago. The house had become quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. It wasn't the calm after a long day, or the soft stillness of a weekend morning. It was something heavier, more permanent. Dinner was a quiet affair now. Sarah and Lily would talk about school, about plans for the week, about small details of their lives that I no longer had context for. They spoke to each other easily, but when I tried to join, the conversation would falter. It wasn't hostility, it was absence. My role at the table had shifted from participant to observer. One evening, I came home early. Sarah was on the phone in the kitchen, her voice low. Lily was at the dining room table working on her laptop. I tried to start a conversation. "How's the college application process going?" I asked. She looked up, surprised. "It's fine," she said, then went back to typing. I stood there, unsure of what to say next. I told myself it was just teenage independence. But the distance between us felt wider than it should have been. Later that night, when everyone was asleep, I went into the dining room to grab a document from my briefcase. That's when I saw it. Lily's application to a state university, half finished, lying on the table. I don't know why I picked it up. Maybe I just wanted to feel involved, even for a moment. I skimmed through her essay, feeling a quiet pride at her accomplishments. Then I reached the section marked Parent Contact Information. My breath caught. Under Primary Parent Contact, the name listed wasn't mine. It was Mark Turner. For a second, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe she'd mixed up the forms. Maybe she meant to list Sarah. But there it was, in neat, deliberate handwriting. His name, his phone number. I stood there in the dim light of the dining room, staring at that page. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was shock. Shock that this wasn't a typo, that it hadn't even occurred to her to list me. Mark Turner. The same man Sarah had mentioned from the class committee. The same man who had been at the parent-teacher conference. I put the paper down carefully, as if handling something fragile. My mind raced, searching for explanations. Maybe it was just convenience. Maybe Mark had offered to help with paperwork. But the truth was harder to swallow. I wasn't the person she thought of when someone asked for a parent contact. The next morning, over coffee, I almost brought it up. But Sarah was talking about her day, and Lily was rushing out the door, and I told myself it wasn't the time. That was the pattern now. There was never a good time. I went to work that day like nothing had happened, but the image of that form stayed with me. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a reflection of a truth I'd been avoiding. In the practical, day-to-day structure of my daughter's life, I had been replaced. That night, when I came home, the house was quiet again. Sarah was reading on the couch. Lily was upstairs. I sat in my office looking at the family photos on the wall. Most of them were years old. I couldn't remember the last time we'd taken one together. I thought about that form, about the way my name wasn't there. It felt like a warning, a signal that I had reached a point where there was no automatic place for me in my family's life. And for the first time, I wondered if it was already too late to change it. The meeting was the kind that could define a quarter. 3 senior partners, 2 high-profile clients, and me, seated at the polished mahogany table, walking them through numbers that had taken weeks to prepare. Halfway through my presentation, My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. I ignored it. A few minutes later, it buzzed again. And again. I silenced it without looking, forcing my focus back on the room. When the meeting finally ended 2 hours later, I stepped into the hallway, loosening my tie. I pulled out my phone and saw 6 missed calls, all from Sarah. My chest tightened. Before I could call her back, a 7th call came in. It wasn't from Sarah, it was from Mark Turner. I answered immediately. "Mark, what's going on?" His voice was calm but firm. "David, I'm at the hospital with Lily. She was in a car accident. She's okay, just some bruises, maybe a sprain. But she wanted me to call you." The words hit me like a blow. She wanted you to call me? She couldn't reach you. She tried. I felt the ground shift under me. I muttered something about leaving immediately and hung up. My hands shook as I called Sarah. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was controlled. "She's stable. I'm with her now. They're running X-rays to be safe." "I'm on my way," I said, already moving. The drive to the hospital was a blur of red lights and missed turns. My mind kept circling back to that one detail. When Lily was scared and in pain, the first person she called wasn't her father. When I walked into the emergency room, I saw Sarah sitting beside Lily's bed. Lily's arm was in a sling, a scrape across her forehead. She looked tired but calm. Mark was standing at the foot of the bed, talking quietly with a nurse. I hesitated in the doorway. Sarah looked up, her expression unreadable. "You're here," she said. Lily turned her head. Her smile was polite, almost like she was greeting a visitor. "Hi, Dad." I stepped closer, my voice catching. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said, then added, "Mark got here really fast." Mark stepped back, giving me space, but his presence hung heavy in the room. I wanted to be angry at him, but the truth was, I was angry at myself. In the moment my daughter needed someone most, I hadn't been reachable. She had learned, over time, that someone else would pick up when I didn't. After the doctor cleared her to go home, Sarah drove Lily back. I followed in my own car, the distance between us feeling larger than the space between our vehicles. That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat alone in my office. The numbers from the meeting were still on my laptop. I stared at them, feeling nothing. The deal would close. The clients would be happy. My career would go on. But my daughter's first instinct in a crisis hadn't been to call me. And that was the kind of failure no quarterly report could fix. The house felt heavier that night, not because of the accident, Lily was fine, but because of what the accident revealed. I could feel it in every quiet moment. The weight of the calls I didn't answer, the names she didn't dial. Sarah was in the kitchen, making tea, her movements deliberate. I stood in the doorway, trying to find the right words. "How is she?" I asked quietly. "She's sore, but she'll be okay." Sarah didn't look at me. She poured the water slowly, letting the steam rise between us like a curtain. "I should have been there," I said. Her eyes flicked up at me, calm but sharper than I'd seen in years. "You should have been there a lot of times, David." I took a step closer, my voice tightening. This was different. "No," she said, setting the cup down with a quiet finality. "It's exactly the same. This was just the time you finally noticed." I felt the words land, but I pressed on. "I was in a meeting. I didn't know." "You have a schedule for everything," she interrupted. "For clients, for presentations, for trips. But somehow, you've never had a schedule for us. Do you realize that?" There's always a reason, always a deadline, always something more urgent, and you've trained Lily to stop expecting you to show up. Her voice wasn't angry. It was worse than that. It was steady, certain, the voice of someone who had stopped waiting for change. I tried to find some way to argue, some proof that I was still the father I thought I was. That's not fair. I've been providing for this family. Providing? Sarah's voice broke for the first time. Do you know what she said to me at the hospital? She said she didn't call you because she didn't think you'd answer. She called Mark because she knew he would. That's not about money, David. That's about trust. The room felt smaller, like the air itself was heavy. I stood there searching for the right defense, the perfect explanation. But all I could find was silence. Sarah's expression softened slightly, but her words didn't. She doesn't see you as the person she goes to first anymore. You're not the first call. You're not the second. Sometimes you're not on the list at all. The truth of it hit harder than any argument. Later that night, I went upstairs to check on Lily. She was sitting up in bed, her arm in a sling, scrolling through her phone. When she saw me, she smiled faintly. "Hey, kiddo," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "How's the arm?" "It's okay," she said. "The doctor said it's just a sprain." "I'm sorry I wasn't there sooner," I told her. "I wish I could have been the one to come get you." She looked at me for a long moment, then glanced down at her phone. "It's okay, Dad. I knew you were busy." Something in her tone made me lean forward. "Lily, you can always call me. No matter what, I'll answer." She hesitated, then looked up at me with eyes that were older than they should have been. "Do you mean that?" "Of course I do," I said quickly. She tilted her head, her voice calm but direct. "Does your schedule have room for me? Because if it doesn't, it's okay. Just don't promise something you can't keep." The question stopped me cold. It wasn't a child's question. It was something closer to a test. I wanted to say yes without thinking, to promise her that nothing would ever get in the way again. But the truth was sitting right there between us. She had grown up in a world where my promises didn't mean much. "I'll make room," I said finally, my voice low. She nodded once, but there was no smile. "Okay. But Dad, just so you know, I don't really ask for much anymore. I learned that from you." The words landed like a stone in my chest. I sat there for a while, watching her scroll through her phone, feeling the quiet space that had grown between us. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disappointment. It was distance. And somehow, that felt worse than either. When I left her room, Sarah was waiting in the hallway. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. "She's not asking you to be perfect," she said softly. "She's just asking you to be present. That's all she's ever wanted." I nodded, but the truth was, I wasn't sure I knew how to bridge the gap anymore. That night, after my conversation with Lily, I went into my home office. The room felt different now, less like a space of accomplishment, more like a museum of everything I'd chosen over my family. On the walls were framed awards, photos from industry events, commendations from colleagues. On the shelves sat the trophies of my career, deals closed, companies saved, titles earned. They looked like proof of success, but in the dim light, they felt more like tombstones, each one marking a moment I wasn't there for my family. For years, I had told myself I could do both, be the man at the top of the ladder and the man my family could count on. But that illusion had shattered. I realized I hadn't just been replaced in practical ways. I had been replaced in their hearts. The title Dad wasn't about biology. It was about being the person your child trusts first. And I wasn't that person anymore. The thought hollowed me out. The next morning, I went into the office, but something felt different. I sat in the conference room, surrounded by partners preparing for a major strategy session. The air buzzed with talk of projections, mergers, market risks. I was supposed to be leading the meeting, but my mind kept drifting to Lily's question. Does your schedule have room for me? The partners started presenting numbers. I was flipping through the reports when my phone buzzed. It was a calendar reminder for Lily's follow-up doctor appointment. In the past, I would have silenced the notification, promised myself I'd call her afterward. But something inside me snapped. I looked around the room at the faces of my colleagues, people who respected me, who expected me to be in control, and for the first time in my career, I didn't care what they thought. I need to step out, I said, closing my folder. The room went silent. One of the partners frowned. David, we're finalizing the Q3 strategy. I know, I said, but my daughter needs me more than this meeting does. It was the kind of statement that didn't belong in a boardroom. I could see the confusion, the shock, but I didn't hesitate. I gathered my papers, stood, and walked out. In the hallway, my assistant caught up to me. David, the managing partner is going to want an explanation. He'll get one, I said, and I meant it in more ways than one. Instead of heading to the elevator, I turned and walked into the managing partner's office. He looked up from his desk, surprised. Everything okay? He asked. No, I said, and for once I wasn't talking about the firm. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep running at this pace and pretending I'm not losing what matters most. He leaned back in his chair. You're talking about stepping back? I'm talking about stepping down, I said. Effective immediately. He stared at me. David, you're at the peak of your career. This is unprecedented. I know, I said. And that's exactly the problem. I've spent so much time being proud of this title that I didn't realize it cost me the one title that actually matters. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he nodded slowly. You've always been decisive. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised you'd make this decision the same way. I left his office without a contract, without a plan, but with something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. That afternoon, I walked into Lily's room just as she was getting home from school. She looked up from her desk, surprised. Dad? What are you doing here? I wanted to go with you to your appointment, I said. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not with anger, but with the cautious skepticism of someone who had heard promises before. Don't you have work? Not anymore, I said. Not the kind that keeps me from being here. She didn't smile right away, but something in her expression softened. In that moment, I realized this wasn't about a single gesture. It wasn't about quitting my job or showing up to one appointment. It was about proving, over time, that I meant it. That my schedule would have room for her. Not because I promised, but because I had built my life that way. For the first time, I wasn't just saying the words. I was acting on them. I'd spent most of my life walking into my office with purpose. That day, my steps felt different. Lighter in one way, heavier in another. The resignation letter was only a single page, but it carried the weight of 25 years. I placed it on the managing partner's desk, signed in bold ink. He leaned back, scanning it once more as if hoping he'd find a clause that could change my mind. David, you don't need to do this. Take a sabbatical. Scale back your hours. We can work something out. I appreciate that, I said. But this isn't about ours. It's about priorities, and mine have been wrong for a long time. He studied me for a moment, then gave a small nod. You've always been decisive. I'll have HR process this today. Walking out of that building for the last time, I expected to feel free, and in some ways, I did. But there was also a gnawing uncertainty. I had no roadmap, no set of KPIs, just the hope that I wasn't already too late. The first thing I did was open my calendar. The same calendar that had been a fortress of deadlines and deals, and start clearing it. Meetings disappeared, flights canceled, dinners crossed out. For the first time in years, I saw blank spaces. I filled them with family, doctor's appointments, Lily's soccer matches, dinner at home every night. I even scheduled nothing, just time to be there. When Sarah came home that evening, I was at the kitchen counter chopping vegetables. She froze in the doorway. You're home early. I'm not just early, I said, setting down the knife. I'm done. I resigned today. Her brow furrowed. You? What? I left the firm. I can't keep choosing work over you and Lily. I don't want to anymore. For a moment she said nothing. Then she crossed her arms. Why now? The question caught me off guard. Because I realized I was losing you. Both of you. And nothing is worth that. Her expression didn't soften. Are you doing this for us? Or are you doing this to prove something to your partners? To make some dramatic statement about walking away at the top? I blinked. Sarah, I'm doing this because I've been wrong. For years. And I can't undo the past. But I can change what I do now. She looked at me carefully, searching my face for something. Maybe sincerity, maybe consistency. David, you've said things before. You've promised things before. And every time, something more important came along. How do I know this isn't just another gesture? Her words hit harder than I expected. I had pictured her relieved, maybe even happy. I hadn't prepared for doubt. I don't expect you to believe me yet, I said quietly. I know what my track record looks like. But this isn't just a gesture. This is me stepping out of the life that kept me from being here. She didn't answer. She turned back to the counter, picking up where I'd left off. We'll see, she said softly. At dinner that night, I told Lily I'd be coming to her soccer game that weekend. She looked surprised, then cautious. Don't you have work? Not anymore, I said. I'll be there. She didn't smile, didn't cheer. She just nodded slowly, as if tucking the information away for later judgment. That was the moment it hit me. Quitting my job wasn't the grand fix I thought it would be. It was just the first step in a long process of proving I meant what I said. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm. For years, I had rushed to the office before dawn. Now I sat at the kitchen table with Sarah and Lily eating breakfast together. It felt strange, almost intrusive, like I was stepping into a routine that had long since learned to function without me. Sarah didn't ask about my plans for the day. Lily talked about school with her usual energy, but her words weren't directed at me. I realized then that being present wasn't just about physically showing up. It was about earning back the space I had vacated. That afternoon, I called the firm to wrap up loose ends. My colleagues were shocked. Some even congratulated me for having the guts to leave. But I didn't feel gutsy. I felt like a man trying to rebuild a house he'd neglected until the foundation cracked. When Sarah came home that evening, I was in the living room going over the household bills. She paused at the doorway. You're managing the finances? I figured it was time I knew the details of our life outside my spreadsheets at work, I said. She gave a small nod, but her expression stayed cautious. David, quitting your job doesn't erase the years you weren't here. It doesn't erase birthdays or holidays or late nights Lily spent wondering if you'd show up. I know, I said. I'm not asking for a clean slate. I'm asking for the chance to build a new one. Her eyes softened just slightly, but her words stayed firm. Then build it. Day by day. We'll see. It wasn't the warm reunion I had imagined, but it was honest, and maybe that was better. Quitting my job didn't magically rewrite the past. I thought walking away from the firm would be a clear sign, an unmistakable declaration that I was putting my family first. But Sarah and Lily didn't rush to welcome me back into their lives. They didn't suddenly treat me like the husband and father I used to be. At breakfast, conversation still flowed mostly between Sarah and Lily. At dinner, they still planned their week without automatically including me. It wasn't cruel. It was careful. They had built a life that worked without me. I was the one trying to earn my way back into it. Lily, in particular, seemed to watch me closely. Not in a hostile way, but with the cautious patience of someone waiting to see if this time would really be different. A few weeks after I resigned, she came into the living room holding a flyer. Dad, there's this big science showcase at school next month. I'm presenting my project. It's kind of a big deal. I smiled immediately. I wouldn't miss it. She hesitated. It's on a Thursday. Afternoon. I'll be there, I said without thinking. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. Are you sure? Because if you can't make it, it's okay. I just don't want you to say yes and then... She trailed off, but I knew how the sentence ended. I'll be there, I repeated, more firmly this time. She nodded slowly, as if filing my answer away under pending verification. It wasn't until the week before the showcase that the twist arrived. I got a call from the managing partner at the firm. David, I know you've stepped away, but we'd love for you to sit in as a consultant for one last high-profile meeting. It's an important client. Your presence would mean a lot. I almost said no immediately. Oh, but then he added, it's the last time we'll ask. Just one meeting. The meeting was scheduled for the same day as Lily's showcase, the exact same afternoon. For a few hours, I wrestled with it. This wasn't technically my job anymore, but it was my reputation. Declining could burn bridges I might one day need. Attending would mean breaking the first real promise I'd made to Lily since I left the firm. Sarah found me staring at my calendar that night. Something wrong? They asked me to consult on a meeting, I said carefully. It's the same day as Lily's showcase. Her expression didn't change. And? I'm not going, I said quickly. She studied me. You're sure? This isn't about what you tell me, David. It's about what you show her. On the day of the showcase, I felt the familiar pull of my old life. My phone buzzed with reminders, emails, even one last message from the managing partner. If you change your mind, the seat is open. I turned the phone face down and walked into Lily's school. The gym was filled with tables displaying projects. Solar systems, volcano models, robotics demos. I spotted Lily at her station, explaining her project to a group of parents. When she saw me, her expression didn't light up immediately. It shifted slowly, cautiously, into something that might have been relief. You came, she said. Of course, I replied. I stayed for the entire showcase, listening as she explained her work to judges, helping her pack up afterward. When we walked out to the parking lot, she glanced up at me. I know your old company wanted you today, she said quietly. I hesitated. How did you know that? Mom told me, she said. She wanted to see if you'd tell me yourself. I stopped walking. Lily, I'm not going back to being that dad. I'm here now. For real. She looked at me for a moment longer, then gave a small nod. Okay. We'll see. It wasn't an embrace. It wasn't tears of joy. But it was something. A door cracking open. I realized then that every promise I made from here on out was part of a test, and the only way to pass was to keep showing up again and again until there was no question in her mind that I meant it. Showing up that day for Lily's science showcase felt different from any meeting I'd ever walked into at the firm. There were no suits, no polished presentations, no high-stakes contracts. Just folding tables covered in poster boards, jars of paint, wires, and the nervous voices of kids trying to sound confident in front of adults. I had skipped the consulting meeting without hesitation. My phone, buzzing all morning with messages from my former colleagues, stayed in my pocket. This wasn't about them anymore. Lily stood behind her table, adjusting the position of a small mechanical model. She didn't see me at first. I stood quietly at the back of the crowd, watching her explain her project to a group of judges. Her voice was clear, steady, focused. When she finally spotted me, she didn't wave wildly or run over. She just paused for half a second, then continued speaking. But I noticed a small shift. Her shoulders seemed to ease slightly, like my being there was something she had registered, even if she wasn't going to make a show of it. I stayed the entire afternoon, moving from table to table, listening to other students while keeping an eye on her. I wanted her to know I was present, not just for the moment, but for the whole experience. When the judges finished, there was a brief awards ceremony. They announced a few honorable mentions, then the top 3 projects. Lily's name was called for second place. She walked up to the stage, accepted her ribbon, and stood beside the other winners. Then, to my surprise, she looked toward the audience. Can my dad come up here for a second? For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her, but the principal gave a nod, and Lily gestured toward me. The crowd parted slightly as I made my way to the stage, feeling awkward and unsure. When I reached her, she didn't hand me the ribbon or hug me. She just looked at the audience and said, "This is my dad. He's learning." The room laughed softly, a few parents smiling knowingly. I felt my face flush, but not from embarrassment. There was something in her voice, a mix of honesty and hope, that told me this was more than a joke. It was an acknowledgement, a small one, but real. I stood beside her for the photo, my hand resting lightly on her shoulder. She didn't lean away. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a door cracked open. After the ceremony, we walked to the car together. She didn't say much, but when we reached the parking lot, she glanced at me. "Thanks for coming." "I wouldn't have missed it," I said. She nodded once. "Yeah, I noticed." That weekend, I started making changes at home. I cooked breakfast on Saturday morning, something I hadn't done in years. Sarah watched me quietly from the kitchen table. Lily joined us later, half awake, hair a mess. We ate together, the 3 of us, without phones or distractions. It felt strange, but in a way that was good. Over the next few weeks, I kept showing up. Not just for big events, but for the small, ordinary things. I drove Lily to practice. I sat in the bleachers at her games. I helped with her project revisions. At first, her responses were polite, cautious, but slowly the edges began to soften. One evening, she asked if I could quiz her for a science test. Another night, she came into my office and sat quietly while I read. She didn't say anything, but she didn't leave right away either. Sarah noticed too. She didn't praise me or congratulate me. She just stopped looking surprised when I was home for dinner. It wasn't trust yet, but it was the start of a pattern. The firm called again once or twice, offering small consulting opportunities. Each time I declined. Each time I told them I had other commitments, and I did. Commitments that didn't involve contracts or clients, but soccer matches and family dinners. About a month after the showcase, there was another school event. This time, a spring concert. Lily didn't say much about it ahead of time, but I found the date on the school calendar and marked it immediately. When I arrived, the auditorium was packed. Parents shuffled into rows, holding programs. I spotted Sarah and Lily's seat in the second row and slipped in beside them. The concert began, the usual mix of off-key enthusiasm and nervous laughter. When it was over, the principal announced that a few students would be recognized for special contributions. Lily's name was called again. She walked to the stage, accepted a small certificate, then looked out at the audience. Her eyes found mine. And then, almost as an afterthought, she said into the microphone, "My dad's here again. He's still learning." The crowd chuckled. I smiled, feeling something tighten in my chest. It wasn't a grand statement, but it was another small opening, another crack in the wall. After the concert, as we walked to the car, she handed me the program. "You can keep this," she said. I glanced at it. Her name was printed in the list of performers. I folded it carefully and slipped it into my pocket. That night, after she went to bed, I sat in my office and looked at the program, the ribbon from her science showcase, the small collection of things that marked my slow re-entry into her world. It wasn't redemption yet, but it was progress. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was building something that mattered. Not a career, but a place in my family's life. Rebuilding my place in Lily's life didn't happen in a dramatic moment. It wasn't a single event that changed everything. It was dozens of small moments, each one adding a brick back into the foundation I had neglected. I learned quickly that I couldn't ask for forgiveness. I couldn't demand trust. I had to show it piece by piece through consistency. I started with the basics, being home for dinner every night. No late meetings, no emergencies that suddenly outranked my family. I drove her to school when I could, picked her up when Sarah was busy. I showed up at every game, every small recital, even when I was just another face in the bleachers. At first, Lily's reactions were measured. She didn't gush, didn't act overly grateful. She was polite, a little surprised, and always watching. I realized she was waiting to see if this was another short-lived burst of effort or something real. Weeks turned into months, and the tone began to shift. She started telling me about school projects before I had to ask. She began sharing stories about her friends, her teachers, the little details of her day that I had missed for so long. One Saturday morning, we were in the kitchen making pancakes. A small tradition Sarah and Lily had built without me years ago. Lily flipped a pancake and said casually, "So, I've been thinking about colleges." I looked at her, trying to keep my voice even. "Yeah? Any ideas?" "A couple," she said. "State U is one. Maybe a smaller liberal arts school. I'm still figuring it out." "That's exciting," I said. "Wherever you choose, I'll be there to help you move in." She gave me a small, almost teasing look. "Really? You'll clear your schedule for that?" I smiled. "It's already cleared." She didn't respond right away, just nodded slightly as she flipped another pancake. But I noticed the way her shoulders relaxed, the subtle shift in her expression. Over the next few weeks, she started including me more. She'd ask for my opinion on her college essays. She invited me to a weekend campus tour, something I didn't realize I'd been waiting to hear. The morning of the tour, I woke early, made coffee, and checked the route twice. Lily came downstairs with her backpack, surprised to see me ready before her. "You're really coming," she said, almost as if she'd expected me to cancel. "Of course I am," I said. "I wouldn't miss this." The drive to the campus was filled with light conversation, music she liked, jokes about how much laundry she'd have to do on her own. When we arrived, we walked through the quad, visited the library, peeked into classrooms. At one point, she stopped by a bulletin board covered in flyers. "They have an astronomy club," she said. "You've always liked space," I said. "Yeah," she replied, then glanced at me. "I was thinking, maybe you could come to the first stargazing night with me, before I start classes." It was a simple invitation, but it landed like a victory. She wasn't just tolerating my presence now. She was actively making space for me in her plans. On the drive home, she talked more about her dreams. She wanted to study physics, maybe engineering. She wanted to travel, to see places she'd only read about. And for the first time, she spoke about those plans with me in the picture, not as an afterthought, but as someone she expected to be there. That evening, back at home, Sarah noticed the change. She didn't say anything directly, but when Lily mentioned the astronomy night, Sarah gave me a look. Half surprise, half approval. It wasn't a grand reconciliation, but it was real. The trust that had been fractured for so long was slowly, steadily being rebuilt. And I realized something important. The real transformation wasn't in Lily. It was in me. I had stopped seeing my presence as something to fit in around my work. It was now the center of my life, the starting point around which everything else had to adjust. There was a time when I thought the perfect calendar was a grid packed edge to edge. Meetings stacked, deadlines layered, trips squeezed into every gap. I used to look at an empty space and see it as a problem to solve. Now I see it differently. The lesson I've learned, and the one I wish someone had taught me earlier, is simple. A perfect schedule isn't the one that makes you more efficient. It's the one that makes you present. I've started telling people that. Old colleagues sometimes call, curious about my life after the firm. They expect stories of travel or new ventures. Instead, I tell them about soccer games, about sitting in a high school auditorium, about campus tours. Some laugh politely. Some get quiet. A few confess they're afraid they'll end up like I almost did, successful in every metric except the ones that matter. I tell them the truth. Your calendar will tell you what your priorities are. If your family's not on it, don't be surprised when you're not on theirs. The transformation in my own life hasn't been about quitting my job or making one big gesture. It's been about replacing the old habit of defaulting to work with a new habit of defaulting to presence. Sarah noticed it, though she doesn't talk about it much. We don't dwell on the years I missed. We focus on what we can build now. There's a quiet understanding between us. Trust is earned in the present, not reclaimed from the past. Lily noticed it too. I see it in the way she invites me into her plans now. Her college essays have space for memories we're still making. Her weekend schedules sometimes start with, "Dad, are you free to?" And I can finally say yes without hesitation. I've also learned something about legacy. It isn't the title you leave behind in a company directory. It isn't a line in an industry magazine. Legacy is the memory your family carries when you're gone. And that memory is shaped in the everyday moments: dinners, late-night talks, rides to school. One Sunday evening, I sat at my desk with my weekly planner open. Old habits die hard. I still like to map out my week. But the priorities are different now. In the past, Monday mornings started with client calls. Now, the first entry was breakfast with Lily, college updates. Wednesday had dinner with Sarah, no phones. And then I came to Saturday. I paused for a moment, then wrote in block letters at the top of the page, "Time with my son. No interruptions." It wasn't a metaphorical son. It was real. My son, who had been patient in his own quiet way, waiting for the same attention I'd been working so hard to give Lily. He'd never said much about my absence, but I knew he'd felt it just as much. This time, I wasn't going to make him wait. I closed the planner and sat back, looking at the week ahead. It wasn't empty. It wasn't overloaded. It was balanced, with the right things in the right places. For the first time in decades, I felt like I'd built a life that matched the promise I'd made at the start of my marriage. Not a promise of wealth or comfort, but a promise to be there. And as I turned off the light in my office, I realized that was the real success. Not the promotions, not the awards. The real success was opening my calendar and seeing my family at the center of it.